My name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. And it's another chonker. They just keep finding me. So today, I am reviewing Roots and Steel by Casey White. This is a gamelit or lit RPG fantasy all about this guild of hunters who fight monsters called fiends, basically normal animals, but big and bad. We follow our protagonist, Trellin, as he has been stuck at a leather tag, which is the second from bottom, for every year of this festival. The festival is the only time you can go out and bag monsters to move up, but because he's been working in his family shop, he's never gotten to go. Well, he decides that he's going to fight outside his zone and at least try to move forward. But then he is caught by this silver-tagged huntress named Avira, and the silver tag is second only to the master of the guild themselves. So basically, low-ranked dude is caught breaking the rules by a high-ranked woman, and he's like, oh crap, this is it. But then Avira offers him a solution. She won't have him expelled, but in return, he becomes her shadow, she'll be his guide, and he's going to help her in the task of killing the biggest of the fiends so that she can earn the gold tag and become the guild master. The festival to allow for new guild master only comes once every decade. It's a whole huge thing. And Trellin has to help her. And in return, he'll move forward. His family will get money. Everyone wins. Now, because this is a lit RPG or a game lit book, the mechanics are a lot of by numbers, and I was a little nervous because the last time I read a lit RPG book, it kept bringing up the same gigantic list of all the abilities that the character could theoretically take, and they would only ever take a couple of them, so it was just so much extra information. And because gamelets or lit RPGs tend to be very big to begin with, this is nearly 700 pages, you don't need that extra info. That's never going to stick in your head. And thankfully, this book only does that at one point. At one point, does the character actually see the list of the abilities he can take and actually choose a couple of them. For the most part, the abilities are uncovered as they're needed for the story. Now, I believe this is connected to a standing property, but I don't know anything about it, so that didn't really affect anything. I will say that the descriptions of the fiends could get slightly aggravating at times because it would take these long explanations for fiends, only to be like, oh, so it's basically like a giant horse monster. Oh, okay, it's basically like a giant spider monster. It was definitely that once you had the entirety of the explanation, it was akin to just big monster version of a real world animal. And so that the fact that it didn't use those very simplistic terms and instead spent so much time on the descriptions was slightly annoying in my head. It's like, oh, there's hooves, so it's probably a hooved creature of some kind. And of course, they're always being described while in battle scenes. There's a lot of fight scenes here. And that also led into one of my biggest problems was this book becomes a slog at certain points. And you don't think it would be because obviously there's giant monsters being fought. The thing is that for the most part, all of the fights are very similar to each other. If Trellin is on his own fighting a beast, he will use his aerial unit, aka grappling hook, at some shape or form. At some point, he will end up flying through the air if he's by himself, or if he's fighting with Avira in pairs against a monster, he will be what is essentially the tank. If you know video game mechanics, the tank, the aggro, whatever, keeping the monster's attention while Avira fights it. And because the tactics were so similar, and a lot of the basic setups of the monsters were similar, giant mouth in the front you don't want to get eaten by, and then usually on the other side of them, they have some kind of spiky tail or poisonous something that you don't want to get hit by. So for some reason, there's usually you don't want to be at the mouth, but you also don't want to be at the back, so you got to come from the side. But that is the setup for a lot of the monsters. And as a result, a lot of the combat can start to feel very repetitive when it's combat scene after combat scene and it's the same. I will say that Trellin is one of my favorite kinds of protagonist, and that is the overly eager and earnest kind. That's also a little naive, and part of the character arc is them shedding that naivete. That's one of my favorites. and I love those characters that are eagerly chasing after a quest as opposed to the more reluctant heroes. They're my favorite. And the dynamic that he had with Avira, with his guide. First and foremost, I was very happy because at first I was slightly nervous. I'm like, are they going to pull that heteronormative, main male character plus main female character must end up together? Because that's going to be weird. It's never explicitly stated, but I get the gist of there's a big age gap between the two. Thankfully, that never happens. The dynamic of their relationship is very, a lot of sarcastic jabs and that kind of stuff. I do wish, this is going to sound weird, I wish they weren't getting along quite as well at the beginning. Not that like I wanted them to be at each other's throats or whatever, but there wasn't a lot of growth in the relationship. And again, this is it. This is a book that is this big, and the combat can get a little bit repetitive in the middle. So I really wanted more of a noticeable development between the two, aside from Avira being secretive about why she wants to enter the tournament so badly and all the normal usual secretive stuff. There's not a lot that changed between the two of them. The most that happens is that like she starts telling him more stuff. But beyond that, it doesn't really feel like there's a lot of growth. It feels like the same or nearly the same bond at the beginning as it is at the end. And again, with how big this book is and how much time is spent fighting in deadly situations together, I wanted a little bit more of a noticeable growth as the story went on. But for the most part, I did enjoy the dynamic. There is some romance, like a little sliver of romance to the side if you really want it. I can tell who the author wants to pair Trellin with, but like I low-key might ship him with someone else, which is very much unlike me, but I just think he and Miles could be good together. Don't hate me. But I did highly enjoy the actual crux of the plot. Once you get into about the last 200 pages of the book, it really picks up. Once they're actually in the land of Deldine, the island where this big monstrous thing must be killed so that the new guildmaster can be not crowned, but new guildmaster can be a thing. It was a lot more placey, because for a lot of this, they're just going through hilly plains or like regular forests. And it's like, okay, I live in the Midwest. That's just where I live. But the island was a kind of otherworldly jungle that, while being an island, like spread really high up with like trees so big and so thick that there were literally like higher up levels that you could like walk and live on, and then deep caverns below so that you could go really far deep down. So it's this island that doesn't have like a lot of space, but it goes vertically really far, and I really like that idea. It also helped that for sake of vagary, to prevent spoilers, new issues arise that twist things around and make their former fighting styles not as effective or even not an option in fighting the big fight. And I really liked that aspect. I really liked that they were forced to do things differently. I did like how the main character slowly is bettering himself throughout the story in terms of gear, and he's like learning things and does gain some new ideas of how to fight and that kind of thing. Again, not maybe quite as much as I would have expected for a book this size, because the book basically says at the beginning that while he's been stuck as a leather tag, his skills and abilities are far, far beyond that already. So it didn't necessarily feel like, oh, he's grown so much. It's, oh, he's been given the tag he already should have had type of deal, that I found a little bit frustrating. So that was the biggest reason that I had to take off a star, was the pacing, and for how much of this is here, I wanted to see more growth in relationships and the characters. But the ending was awesome. It was one of those where my timer had gone off for that reading session, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna keep going. like I can't stop now. You have to keep going. Pretty much like from the last 100 pages on, it was, I don't want to stop reading, which is really what I look for in an ending. I should feel a loss at the very concept of stopping the book during the last 100 pages. Like, I should not want to stop from at least 50 pages from the end out because of everything that's going on. And I really liked all the action sequences in that section. Again, like I mentioned before, the area that they were fighting in was a lot different. There was also, and again, vagueness for spoilers, a new element introduced late in the game that I really liked. Honestly, it speaks to how much the last 200 pages impressed me, that the slogging didn't matter as much. Now, of course, we are talking about a lit RPG, so one of the concepts we have to talk about is how accessible is this for new readers. Now, the book doesn't really try, at least that much, to explain away why the characters can see the information that would basically be on a hood, a heads-up display in a video game. Like Trellin can see his rank, his aura number, his abilities. Like, he can see all that, and they do have the abilities inked onto their skin that glow, so it kind of tells you when someone else does it. But there's also he literally sees in his vision the activity or ability activated. Like, he sees that, and the game the book tries to explain it away a little bit with the fact that they have these magical tags that they wear, and that somehow lets them see it. But for the most part, you're just gonna have to accept that every character that is a hunter in this world is looking through the world with a heads-up display, like a video game. You just kind of have to accept that as being a thing, and stretch your willing suspension of disbelief that far. Now, you do not have to have a ton of awareness of video game mechanics to understand it. I would not consider myself a consummate gamer. I play a lot of Sims and Stardew Valley and some Skyrim. So as long as you have a rudimentary understanding of video game mechanics, like the concept of an energy bar that needs to be refilled, the concept of aggroing or being a tank, or the concept of, time-based abilities, daily abilities, like that kind of thing. As long as you have a general idea of what those kind of concepts are, it should be fine. I'm not sure how much of an accessible read this would be if you didn't have that basic understanding. However, I honestly do feel that if you're the kind of person to want to read giant fantasy books, you tend to be the same kind of person that at least is aware of video games as a concept. So I don't know. You'll have to let me know if you're someone that's ever read books like this without knowing anything about video games. Is it simple to understand? I don't know. You definitely don't need to know anything about the Coreverse to get the gist. I didn't. But I'm not sure how accessible this would be if you did not already have those baseline understandings of video games. But that, at this point, that's just most lit RPGs. So in the end, I gave this book 4 stars. If you are a fan of this genre, you will definitely enjoy this one. Like I mentioned before, the character will be coming back. Our protagonist will be coming back, although I believe, again, that it will not necessarily be a direct sequel, and I don't know if he will be the protagonist, but I would love to see him again. He kept a lot of his eagerness and earnestness throughout the book. I was happy to see that the author did not pull the whole, growing up means apathy. I really liked that he maintained that aspect of his character, and I would highly suggest this one if you like this kind of thing. If you are an indie author and you would like a review like this one, feel free to send me a request. I will have all that information down in the description below. Please remember to read through my review policy. It answers a lot of questions and saves us a lot of time. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.